I'm Laurie Popp with Spark and Logic. Today's topic is how to get started with drone photography for your real estate business. Joining me today is commercial photographer and drone expert, Ken Hekhuis. Ken, good morning.
Hi, good morning, Laurie. Thanks for having me today. I appreciate it.
I'm so glad you're here with us. So tell us a little bit about your background.
Okay, so let's just go right with the photography background. So I've always been taking a lot of images all my life. I've always really enjoyed doing photography, but I just didn't do it professionally. I didn't do it commercially. I just enjoyed taking photos, like a lot of us do, right? And obviously, I think we all grew up in that era without cell phones and without a photographic object in our hand at all times. So you had to go out of your way to actually grab a camera and take pictures. So you were a little bit more intentional with them. Now I think people just kind of grab their cell phone and just candidly take images, which is great. I think it's awesome. Everybody's taking photos, but I think there's something to be said about intentionally taking an image with a purpose, right? So you're seeing the vision, you're seeing the composition, you're taking that image. A lot like your realtors out there that are watching this, you have very intentional images you're trying to create. And that's a very important part of the whole process is to understand that composition, what looks good. Like when you see an image, what makes you want to stare at it longer? And of course, that's kind of a little bit what we're going to talk about today is how to create that image that your potential customers are going to stare longer at your particular house that you're selling and keep them captivated to click to the next image, to feel that kind of bond with the home. Getting above and getting a different perspective is something that's very critical. I think that every home, regardless of whether it's just a $110,000 house or whether it's a $5 million home, I think all homes should have some drone aerial photography. That being said, there's a lot of rules and regulations and restrictions to it. So I think Laurie's got a lot of questions to touch up on some things today.
We certainly do, because I was not aware of all of the regulations and things that you have to do before you even pick up the drone and launch it in the air. So
That's
we
right.
were talking about Part 107. Tell me
That's
more.
right.
What is Part 107?
That's a great question, Laurie. So the biggest part of this whole thing, you guys, is what's called the Part 107. Now, what that officially refers to is your commercial actual UAS, unmanned aircraft system license. You have a pilot's license. Now, the FAA is very, very strict in their regulations. They do not play games. They do not joke around. This isn't an optional thing. This isn't like, well, maybe I'll get it down the road. A Part 107 gives you a license to be a commercial pilot. Now, what that means is if I'm operating my drone and I decide to take off from my backyard and I take a beautiful picture of the river behind my home, I think it's great. All I do is post that picture online. That picture is just seen and everybody likes it, comments, great. But now let's say that I put my little logo, Ken Hekhuis Photography, on that photo. Instantly, that image now becomes commercial photography. Instantly, because I'm promoting a business on there. And with commercial photography with a drone, you have to 100%. There is no exception. So no matter what anybody tells you, I can assure you 100% on this answer. Yes, you need a Part 107 to take commercial images with a drone. Same goes for if all of a sudden I'm doing some real estate photography and I need to take some images of a house. Well, if I don't have my Part 107, every one of those images is a commercial image. So the second that gets put on your website and is used for advertising purposes for your home that you're selling, that is now a commercial image. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. There are some talks about, well, I read online that if your drone's under 250 grams, it doesn't have to be registered with the FAA and it's kind of a freebie. It's under the radar. That is actually 100% incorrect. There's a lot of misnomers on the internet. Don't trust the internet. If you really want to know the actual facts, always go to the source, right? Go to the FAA website. They have tons of information. They will literally spell it out for you that there's a lot of no, 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 no's, not a lot of yes, yes, yeses. One major thing that you also have to keep in mind is that these drones can sometimes just fly away. So this is a thing, it's called a flyaway. There are things that happen within the mechanics of the digital component and GPS satellites that it connects to and all that, where they go haywire and they lose control and you literally can't control your drone and it just flies off into the distance. And they can literally fly on a fresh battery charge. You got 42 minutes worth of drone flying on most drones. So that thing's going to fly for 42 minutes until it hits another object or it just runs out of power and falls to the ground. So it's a huge responsibility.
So for most of our real estate agents that will be utilizing drone photography, I'm assuming most of the shots that, let's say we've got all our regulations, we have our license, we're good to go out there.
Yep.
Next step then would be, what would be some of the key shots that you might want to take with a drone? And you were mentioning you can't go up above 400 feet. I don't even think 400 feet is probably the recommended height. Is that too tall? Too tall? Well, too high up in the air for an effective photo that you'd want to use for your promotion, your marketing photos?
Yes, good question. So that would be actually, I do take photos at 400 feet. I try to maximize it. And the reason being is this: let's say somebody's got a home for sale in a neighborhood closer to the lakeshore, but you can't tell when you're in the neighborhood it's near the lakeshore. So I'd like to go up to 400 feet and I want to pan so I can see that lakeshore in the background. I might see the water in the background. I can see where the house is located. When I do real estate photography for people, I'll put like a little arrow aimed at the house that is in the image. And then you can see the whole area around it and you'll be able to see the different landmarks and the water and things like that are selling features from that height. So yes, higher altitude is a great advantage. But again, there's a fine line between too high and just high enough. And sometimes, 400 feet seems high. It's really not. Like when you actually see the perspective from the drone, a lot of times I'm like, if I could get to 1,000 feet, this would be such a great photo, but I just can't.
Right. So what other tips would you recommend when you're, out there flying the drone, grabbing this footage to market the property? What are the other shots that you really want to make sure that you get?
Great. So I like to do a 4-section shot. So I like to do, well, technically 5. So I like to do one. Let's start with number 1. One would be facing the house from the front at a slight angle. So I would maybe be up, and this just depends on the home, whether it's a ranch, whether it's a 2-story, et cetera, what type of vegetation's around us. So I want to get one that's above the ground. You see the whole house, you see the roof line really clearly, kind of that up aerial perspective looking down. Then I like to do all the corners. So I like to do the far right corner of the house looking down. So you see the whole yard and the property. Then go to the other angle, get the other corner, get the whole property and yard, then the backyard, each corner. This way you can see those kind of 3-dimensional perspectives that you don't just see standing there looking straight out. When we can see down on things, we have a much better visualization and perspective. And everybody, that makes your yards look bigger. So think about depth perception. When we get up above something and look down, the space looks so much bigger than if we're standing in there looking straight. And that's just because of the way our depth perception works. It works in photography that way too. So you want to make sure that you can share that, you can see that whole perspective of the property.
Okay. That makes sense. Because there's so many times you're watching some drone footage and the professionals like yourself, they know exactly what those angles are that you want to capture. But then you can tell when the amateur might be up there and it's not as engaging, the content.
Yep.
So what would be your suggestion? At what point do you say, okay, I really don't know enough about drone photography? Maybe it's that I still didn't even do the part 107. Where do you make the decision, do you think, to hire a professional versus continuing to try to DIY it?
Okay. So the first part of your question is to understanding the angles and things. One tip I would give everybody is not to fly too high above the roof line when capturing the property. You want to still feel like you can see the sides of the house. So if we get too high, all of a sudden we lose the front of the house and we just start seeing the roof, right? And then it's just a roof image. So we don't want to have those angle shots all too high. So sometimes it's 20 feet up. Sometimes it's 30 feet up. It doesn't have to be super high to give you that great perspective. But if you get too high, you will look amateur. Like you mentioned, you'll just basically get a great view of the shingles and everybody will know if it needs a new roof or not.
Right.
So we don't want to do that. But, yeah, where it comes into play of hiring a professional versus hiring yourself to do it, if you will, it really boils down to a couple things. Number one, you cannot do it yourself if you don't have a Part 107. Even if you own your own business and you're your own realtor, somebody can report you. The fines can go up to $250,000 with the FAA and up to 3 years in prison. So I can assure you, if you are doing it near an airport region, they're probably going to go for the full whammy on making sure you are an example.
And so I think what it boils down to is, number one, understand what drone photography is all about and do your due diligence ahead of time, especially with the Part 107. Like you said, that is not anything that you can skimp on. And definitely you should be shooting for an A on that test. And
Yes.
I can also imagine that when the real estate agent goes to promote what services they offer, that being able to state that they're Part 107 certified or licensed, whatever the terminology is,
Correct.
that can help put them head and shoulders above their competition, that
By
they
far.
know what they're doing. But even though you do that, I think is the key to this: practice, 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 so that you know where those shots are as far as altitude and angles and
Yes.
okay.
So when it comes to actually doing the photography in the videography, and I love the videography panning of a house with a drone. It's beautiful. It's just, it tells a story. It's just so amazing. But yeah, a lot of practice, because there's a lot of functions within the cameras of your drones too, in the settings, because sometimes, a lot of people want to shoot in auto. The only problem with shooting things in auto is you're letting the camera decide what looks good. Well, a lot of times your camera will overexpose an image and it'll make things way too bright. And when it's way too bright, unfortunately, if there's bright, harsh white light, that doesn't actually record as data. So if you were to try to bring that harsh light down, it wouldn't actually have any pixels there to change. So it can ruin images, and you can have these really washed out looking images. So you definitely would like to try to shoot more in a manual controlled mode. Again, practice, like you said, Laurie, practice, practice, practice. And so you have control over your images. It takes a lot of practice. It really does. Flying the drone takes a lot of practice. One thing I forgot to mention too is, like, your drone has to be registered. So every drone that's flown, you have to go on and register your drone with the FAA, and you actually have to put a tail number on your drone, on the body of your drone. You must have that. That's a law. And so just like an aircraft has a tail number, all of my drones have individual tail numbers that are registered with the FAA. They know who owns it, i.e. me. They know the serial number on the drone, because if it gets a flyaway and crashes, somebody finds it, they know how to track it back to you.
Right.
So,
okay.
Yep. So I forgot to mention that little caveat there. So yeah, you have to have your drone registered too. So there's a lot of details, but again, it can be a lot of fun. I'm not trying to scare anybody off on it, but what I do try to do is really, really express the seriousness of a drone. People have a real soft palate for it, thinking it's just a toy. It is far from a toy. It's far from a toy. And so it is a tool, and it's a great tool. And for the photography side of it, it can be a lot of fun and a great advantage over your competition. And your competition should have Part 107. And if they don't, that's a problem, because everybody should have it, and they are illegally using images if they don't have a Part 107. That should be reported. And I don't say that to be mean to people. I say that to be safe, because it's no different than the people I saw flying their drone on the beach through people. There's no guards on the blades. And I know how these drones can react sometimes. They can be just all over the map, and anything can happen at any time. It's safety.
Right. So I think you've brought up so many good points. Know the rules and regulations. Make sure you've got your Part 107. Practice makes perfect. And it may even behoove somebody to hire that professional first and watch what they're doing. Look at the output then that they provide you with, the footage, and know that that's what you're aiming for. Most likely is that you want to have just as good quality if you want to do it yourself. So I really appreciate all the information you shared with us today, Ken. It's fabulous. I think drones are an amazing tool that real estate professionals can be using in their business. And I think it can definitely be a game changer to set yourself apart from your competition, especially so many different properties, whether it's out on the Great Lakes here in the state of Michigan, or you're out on farm ranches, things with a lot of acreage. Drones are definitely going to be needed. And I think I liked what you said at the beginning too. Every real estate listing most likely deserves some drone footage.
Absolutely.
Not just for the luxury properties. I think it can be incorporated and make your client feel really good about your marketing skills, that you're using all the technology that's available to you.
Absolutely.
So thank you. Thank you again for joining us, Ken. And we'll have your information at the end of our video here if anybody would like to reach out to you.
All right. Thanks a lot. I appreciate you guys.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. All the best.